Picture a song so powerful that the government targeted the singer. Imagine music that radio stations refused to play for decades. Some songs didn't just get banned, they stayed banned year after year, sometimes for entire lifetimes. These are the stories of songs that faced censorship that lasted not just months, but decades. Why these 10 songs were banned for 50+ years. Number 10. Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday.
Strange fruit hanging from the...
In 1939, Billie Holiday walked onto the stage at Café Society in Greenwich Village to perform a song that would change her life forever. The club went completely dark except for a single spotlight on her face. The waiters stopped serving. And then she sang about southern trees bearing strange fruit, a haunting metaphor for the lynching of Black Americans.
Bulging eyes and the twisted...
The song was written by Abel Meeropol, a Jewish schoolteacher from the Bronx, who had seen a photograph of 2 black men lynched in Indiana in 1930. The image haunted him, and he turned his horror into a poem called Bitter Fruit, later setting it to music. When Holiday first heard it, she was deeply moved, but terrified to perform it. She knew it would make her a target.
Tree.
Columbia Records refused to let her record it, deeming it too controversial. Her producer, John Hammond, also refused to help. She sang the song a cappella for Milt Gabler, who was so moved he agreed to record it. She eventually recorded it with the independent Commodore label in 1939, after Columbia agreed to release her from her contract for 1 session.
Scent of magnolia, sweet and free.
The Federal Bureau of Narcotics, led by Harry Anslinger, immediately took notice. Anslinger was a racist who had previously worked for the Department of Prohibition and was determined to wage war on drugs. He saw Holiday as a symbol of everything threatening to America, a black woman refusing to stay silent about racial violence. According to author Johann Hari, Anslinger resolved to destroy her specifically because she insisted on continuing to sing this song.
And bitter.
Holiday received direct warnings from federal agents telling her to stop singing the song. She refused. Anslinger then orchestrated a systematic campaign to destroy her life and career. He used her heroin addiction, which stemmed from trauma she'd experienced since childhood, as a weapon. His agents targeted her relentlessly. She was arrested, imprisoned for over a year, and when she was released in 1948, federal authorities refused to reissue her cabaret performer's license. This meant she was permanently banned from singing in any venue that served alcohol in New York City, essentially destroying her main source of income and the venues where she had built her career. Many radio stations across the South banned the song outright and continued to refuse to play it for decades. The song remained effectively censored from mainstream radio in many markets well into the Civil Rights era. Holiday continued to perform it whenever she could, until her death in 1959 at age 44, pursued by authorities to the very end. The systematic censorship and persecution she faced for singing this song lasted the entire 20 years from 1939 until her death. Time magazine would later call it the Song of the Century, and it was inducted into the National Recording Registry in 2003. But for Billie Holiday, singing it cost her everything.
For the tree.
Number 9. Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. In 1963, the Kingsmen recorded what should have been a straightforward cover of a Richard Berry song. Lead singer Jack Ely's slurred vocals and the muddy recording quality made the words nearly impossible to understand. That's exactly what got it banned. Radio stations received complaints from listeners convinced the unintelligible lyrics contained obscenities. Parents wrote letters demanding the song be removed from airplay. The panic spread across the country. Conservative groups claimed the song was corrupting American youth with hidden dirty words. The FBI launched an investigation in February 1964 that lasted 31 months, over 2.5 years, trying to determine if the song was obscene. This was an extraordinary use of federal resources. Agents analyzed the recording at different speeds, brought in audio experts, and tried every method possible to decipher the lyrics. They interviewed band members. They examined the sheet music. They compared multiple versions of the song. The FBI investigation concluded that the lyrics were indecipherable and therefore couldn't be classified as obscene. But the damage was done. The investigation itself had turned the song into a national scandal. The governor of Indiana declared the song pornographic and banned it statewide. Multiple radio stations refused to play it for years, even after the FBI cleared it. The controversy turned the song into a phenomenon. Teenagers everywhere wanted to hear what adults were trying to ban. The single sold millions of copies and became a garage rock standard. Yet some stations maintained their ban for decades, with certain conservative markets refusing to play it well into the 1980s, over 20 years after its release. The Kingsmen's drummer later admitted that someone in the band did yell an obscenity during the recording, but it was buried so deep in the mix that nobody could hear it. The real lyrics were completely innocent. The FBI had investigated a song for over 2 years over absolutely nothing. Number 8. God Save the Queen by Sex Pistols. When the Sex Pistols released this punk anthem in May 1977, it was timed to coincide with Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee celebration. The timing was deliberate provocation. The song's anti-monarchy message and aggressive sound made it instantly controversial. The BBC banned it immediately, and the Independent Broadcasting Authority followed suit, prohibiting its broadcast on both radio and television. Major record retailers, including Woolworths and Boots, refused to stock the single. Workers at the pressing plant initially refused to handle it. The entire music industry establishment tried to suppress it. Yet despite being banned from airplay and unavailable in mainstream stores, the song sold massively through independent shops and mail order. It reached number 2 on the UK singles chart, though many believe it actually outsold the number 1 song, but was kept from the top spot due to political pressure from the Jubilee organizers. The ban extended far beyond just airplay. Several venues canceled Sex Pistols concerts. Workers at some venues refused to set up equipment for them. The band faced physical attacks from angry citizens and even from dock workers who beat them after a boat performance. When they tried to perform on a boat on the Thames during the Jubilee, police raided the vessel and arrested several people connected with the event, including manager Malcolm McLaren. The establishment was determined to silence them at every opportunity. BBC Radio 1 maintained its ban on the song for years. Even decades later, the song remained controversial. While it's no longer officially banned, many radio stations still choose not to play it due to its content. The cultural stigma and unofficial censorship surrounding the song lasted well over 30 years, making it one of the most persistently controversial records in British music history. Number 7. A Day in the Life by the Beatles. The final track on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band faced an immediate BBC ban in May 1967. The BBC decided that certain lines in John Lennon's verses contained drug references, particularly the surreal imagery and the mention of holes. The phrase about reading the news and the dreamlike quality of the verses all pointed, in their view, to LSD use. The organization deemed it unsuitable for broadcast and removed it from their playlists. This was significant because in 1967, The BBC was the primary way British listeners discovered new music. Radio Luxembourg existed, but the BBC dominated the airwaves. Being blocked from Radio 1 meant the song couldn't reach the massive daily audience that tuned in. Despite the Beatles' enormous fame and their ability to sell albums without radio play, the band still stung and represented official disapproval of their work. The irony was striking. The Beatles had created one of their most ambitious and artistic works. The song featured a groundbreaking orchestral crescendo, recorded with 40 musicians who were instructed to start at their lowest note and gradually rise to their highest, creating an unprecedented wall of sound. The final piano chord was struck by all four Beatles simultaneously on multiple pianos and allowed to ring out for over 40 seconds. The recording took 34 hours and cost over £850, an enormous sum for 1967. The song pushed the boundaries of what could be done in a recording studio. Yet the BBC refused to play it. Somebody spoke and I went into a dream. American stations were divided. Some played it freely, while others avoided it due to concerns about drug content. Progressive rock stations eventually made it a staple, but mainstream top 40 stations often steered clear. I read the news today, oh boy. The BBC never officially announced lifting the ban. The song simply started appearing on playlists decades later. But the unofficial ban lasted for years, and many stations continued to avoid it throughout the 1970s and beyond. The song's status remained uncertain for decades, making it one of the longest-running cases of Beatles censorship. Number 6. Killing an Arab by The Cure. The Cure released this song in 1978, inspired by Albert Camus' novel The Stranger. The title and certain phrases were taken directly from the book's climactic scene. Despite the literary source, the song faced immediate controversy and bans due to its title. I'm alive. I'm dead. The BBC initially gave it airplay, but as complaints mounted about perceived racism, many stations pulled it from rotation. The title alone was enough to trigger bans, even though the song was the artistic interpretation of existential literature, not a racist statement. The controversy intensified after the 1991 Gulf War. The BBC placed the song on a list of 67 songs banned during the conflict to avoid offending listeners. This ban lasted throughout the war and beyond. Many stations simply never returned it to regular rotation. The Cure tried to address the issue in later years by retitling it on some releases. They added statements explaining the literary context. Robert Smith expressed frustration that people judged the song based on its title without understanding its origin or meaning. But the damage was done. Decades later, some radio stations and streaming services still flag or avoid the song. The censorship issues surrounding it have persisted for over 40 years since its release, making it one of the longest-running controversies in alternative rock history. Number 5. Tell Laura I Love Her by Ray Peterson. This teenage tragedy song from 1960 tells the story of a young man who dies in a stock car race while trying to win money to buy his girlfriend an engagement ring. The BBC banned it immediately upon release for its theme of young death. Tell Laura I love her. The British Broadcasting Corporation had strict policies against songs depicting teenage mortality. They worried that such songs glamorized death or might inspire copycat behavior. The ban wasn't limited to just this song. The BBC had a pattern of banning death songs throughout the 1960s. Tell Laura I need her. The ban in the UK lasted for decades. While the song became a hit in America, reaching number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100, British listeners couldn't hear it on the radio. Import copies circulated among teenagers. but official airplay remained prohibited. Other versions of the song also faced bans. Ricky Valence's UK cover was similarly censored. The theme of tragic young love ending in death remained taboo for British broadcasters throughout the 1960s and well into the 1970s. Some stations maintained their policy against teenage death songs for over 20 years. The song's ban became emblematic of the BBC's paternalistic approach to broadcasting standards. While American teenagers could hear Peterson's emotional performance freely, British youth were protected from it by authorities who deemed them too fragile to handle the subject matter. Number 4. 100 Pounds of Clay by Gene McDaniels.
Just 100 pounds of clay.
Gene McDaniels released this song in 1961, telling the biblical-inspired story of creation through a romantic lens. The BBC banned it almost immediately, but not for the reason you might expect. They found the religious references inappropriate for broadcasting.
With just 100 pounds of clay.
The song mixed sacred themes with romantic love, which troubled BBC censors. They believed treating biblical creation stories in the context of a pop song was disrespectful. The ban extended to Craig Douglas's cover version as well. Both versions were kept off BBC airwaves.
He made my life worth living, and I will thank.
The widespread ban on this and similar songs helped fuel the rise of pirate radio stations in the 1960s. These unlicensed broadcasters operated from ships in international waters to avoid prosecution, playing songs the BBC wouldn't touch. They became wildly popular specifically because they played banned records.
Just 100 pounds of clay.
In America, the song reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 with no controversy. British listeners had to tune into illegal pirate stations to hear what Americans were enjoying freely. The BBC's ban lasted throughout the 1960s and into the 1970s as their policies on religious content slowly evolved.
He created a woman.
The case illustrated how different broadcasting standards could create vastly different musical experiences. A wholesome love song that was a major hit in America remained banned from British airwaves for over a decade based purely on its religious metaphor.
Just 100 pounds of clay. He made.
Number 3. My Generation by The Who. The Who's 1965 anthem faced an unusual ban from the BBC. It wasn't the rebellious lyrics or the loud guitars that troubled censors. It was Roger Daltrey's stuttering vocal delivery. The BBC deemed it potentially offensive to people who actually suffered from speech impediments. The decision created an absurd situation. The song was clearly a generational anthem about teenage rebellion and not wanting to grow old. The stuttering was a stylistic choice that fit the angry, frustrated mood of the piece. But the BBC's policies required them to consider any content that might offend any listener. Radio stations pulled the song from rotation. The ban lasted for months. Eventually, when the song became such a massive hit despite the ban, the BBC quietly reversed their decision. But the initial censorship had already established the paternalistic tone of 1960s broadcasting standards. Years later, the controversy seemed ridiculous even to the BBC. But at the time, it represented the rigid approach broadcasters took to anything that might be considered insensitive. The Who had created one of rock's defining anthems, only to have it banned for a reason that had nothing to do with the song's actual message. While the initial ban was relatively short-lived compared to others on this list, the principle it established, that broadcasters could ban songs based on the most minor potential offense, set a precedent that affected music censorship for decades. Number 2. I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. Bob Geldof wrote this 1979 song after reading a telex report about a school shooting in San Diego. A 16-year-old girl named Brenda Ann Spencer had opened fire on an elementary school across the street from her home, killing the principal and a custodian and injuring 8 children and a police officer. When a reporter asked why she did it, she reportedly said she didn't like Mondays and wanted to liven up the day. The casual, flippant response to such horror shocked people around the world.
Tell me why I don't like Mondays. Tell me why I don't.
American radio stations, particularly in California, where the shooting occurred, immediately banned the song when it was released. The shooting was too recent, too raw. Parents of the victims were still grieving. Families of victims found the song exploitative and painful. Stations received complaints from listeners who felt Geldof had turned an unspeakable tragedy into entertainment for profit. The ban spread to multiple markets across the United States. Program directors made the decision independently. There was no government order, but the collective response created an effective blackout. Some stations maintained it for years, refusing to play a song about such a sensitive subject. The shooting had traumatized the San Diego community, and many felt the song reopened wounds. Even decades later, some stations avoid it, particularly around anniversaries of school shootings or after new incidents occur. The song became a reminder of pain rather than a commentary on violence.
Tell me why I don't like Mondays. Tell me why I don't.
In the UK and Europe, where the shooting hadn't dominated news coverage, the song became a massive hit and reached #1. But American audiences were largely denied access to it through mainstream radio. The censorship wasn't official or government mandated, but it was real and widespread. Geldof defended the song as commentary on the senselessness of violence, not a celebration of it. He saw the shooter's flippant answer as revealing something disturbing about society, but his artistic intentions couldn't overcome the pain the subject matter caused. The song's controversial status has persisted for over 40 years. Even today, many American stations choose not to play it, making it one of the longest-running cases of voluntary censorship in rock history. Number 1. Spasticus Autisticus by Ian Dury.
I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, autisticus, I'm spasticus.
Ian Dury released this song in 1981 in response to the United Nations declaring that year the International Year of Disabled Persons. Dury, who had contracted polio at age 7 and lived with disabilities his entire life, felt patronized by the designation.
I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, autisticus.
The song was a deliberate provocation, confrontational, refusing to sugarcoat the disabled experience, and full of dark humor about charity and pity. Dury intentionally used language that society considered offensive, reclaiming terms that had been used against disabled people.
I'm nobbled on the cobbles 'cause I hobble when I wobble. Swim.
The BBC banned it immediately. Radio stations refused to play it. Disability advocacy groups were divided. Some appreciated Dury's refusal to be pitied, while others found the language and tone problematic. The ban remained in effect throughout the 1980s.
I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, autisticus, I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus.
What made this case particularly complex was that Dury himself was disabled and speaking from lived experience. He wasn't an outsider making light of disability. He was someone who had endured the harsh realities of disabled life in 1950s Britain, including time in institutions that passed for disabled schools.
I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, autisticus, I'm spasticus.
The song remained effectively banned from broadcast for decades. Even after Dury's death in 2000, radio stations continued to avoid it due to its controversial language. While some progressive stations eventually played it in the 2000s, it never received widespread airplay. The censorship has lasted over 40 years. Jury's intention was to challenge comfortable assumptions about disability and charity. Instead, his provocative approach resulted in the song being silenced, proving, perhaps, exactly the point he was trying to make about how society treats disabled voices.
I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus, I'm spasticus autisticus.
These songs shared something in common. They made people uncomfortable enough to try to silence them. Whether through official government action, broadcasting bans, or industry pressure, each faced censorship that lasted not just months, but years, sometimes decades. Some bans were eventually lifted, others quietly faded, and a few persist in unofficial ways even today. The attempt to silence these songs often made them more powerful, turning censorship into a kind of endorsement that the music truly mattered. If you enjoyed this look at music that authorities tried to silence, hit that like button and subscribe.